Thank you all for being here. Today we'll be talking about some social choice applied to AI alignment, which has already been mentioned today. It's a very hot topic these days. Doing work with some other people at Harvard in the lab with Ariel and some folks at WashU.
You hit the big button and
yeah. I think I might have messed up this thing.
reached the limit of my knowledge.
I can just use the arrow keys. Yeah, okay. Yep. Cool. All right. So a very quick abstraction of an LLM. Maybe you already know how they work, but yeah. So LLMs, what's their goal? They're trying to predict the next word given a sequence of words. Right. So the cat's out on the what's the next word? Maybe it thinks reasonable chance for Matt, some chance for Tara. Actually plug this in. This seems like somewhat close to reality. And how is it doing this prediction? It's trained on tons and tons of text from places like Wikipedia, Reddit, archives. There's this big distribution over text, and it's getting really good at predicting the next word, the sequence. And this is really amazing. Somehow, like doing this works extremely well on tons of different tasks. I mean, everyone's seen the news and this stuff. So in some sense, they're very revolutionary, but they're not perfect. If you just purely train on this text and try to match this distribution that we're trained on, that might not necessarily be exactly what we want. Right? So so what are some flaws? Maybe in the data, there's things that we don't want it to be predicting, right? So like some stuff is dangerous. You ask it how do I build a bomb, and there's something in the data set that it knows it could just predict this and say this, and this is reasonable according to the distribution. Maybe we don't want it to actually say this. It might be biased. What if the underlying data is biased? Huge issue, very, very well known, but clearly text that humans have been creating for however many years has some issues. Currently, we maybe don't want to perfectly match this. And just in general, it might not be perfect. There might just be ways that we can try to get to improve, right? Summarize the following essay, use the text that outputs a few different possible things. Some just might be better answers than others. You want something more concise, very on topic. And sometimes it's not, sometimes very wordy and kind of misses some things. So there's just room for us to improve, even if we're matching the distribution perfectly. Maybe that's not one. So here's a solution. That's not the only solution, but so what's been done so far. So the goal is we just want to slightly adjust the LLM. It's called fine-tuning or aligning so that it prefers better outputs. And again, not the only way to do this, but a very common way to do this is with this method called reinforcement learning from human feedback, RLHF. How does this work? So first we start with the second half, this human feedback. We collect lots of data done in various different ways. The idea is, we're going to show you a few different prompt and answers and ask which ones you prefer, or rank a few things of this flavor. So person one says, I like this first summary better than the second summary. It's more concise, or I prefer, I think it's much safer to say I won't tell you how to build a bomb than actually give you the description of how to do this. Good. Okay. Step two is using this data. We need to turn this into a reward function so we can have it interact with the LLM. So we somehow need to do some learning step and turn these comparisons into an actual word function that, given a piece of text, outputs a number so we can optimize. And the final step, so I don't really understand that well, but apparently they can run some reinforcement learning using this and then adjust the LLM to prefer higher reward. So very natural idea. Where can we come in as social choice theorists? I would claim the second step really is kind of a social choice problem. This data is not necessarily totally uniform. People have slightly different ideas, especially when we're talking about various summaries, how detailed it wants to be in certain answers. So people are not perfectly aligned, and yet we still need to pick a single reward function that somehow represents them. So this is in some sense a social choice problem. Different views, one single reward function output. So what's currently going on? So we have a bunch of things that we've collected data on. So this thing see as this abstract prompt responses that people have given responses to, and then some data set in front of it really is pairwise comparisons. We'll look at variations of these. And the thing that helps us is that we do have some information about these things that we're asking to compare. They have some like feature vector that the LLM can produce. So it's both pairwise comparisons, but on things that have known feature vectors. And something that's done in practice, it seems like the RL people really don't mind this, is we're only going to look at linear reward functions. They think this like feature space is really rich enough that this is pretty reasonable. We shouldn't have to go with super complex reward functions. You can of course do, neural nets here. That's so the way to think about it is we're just picking some data, and your reward for a specific input output type thing is just the inner product. And so right now what they're doing is, given all this data, they fit a Bradley-Terry Luise model. So you may be familiar with this. But the high level idea is they're fitting some loss function. There's a big space of data. We want to pick some data that's getting pretty close to this data set according to Bradley-Terry. Turns out to correspond like cross entropy loss. So it's within the sort of ML frame. And then our question as social choice theorists, is this a good way to choose data? What does it mean to be good? And so to answer this question, we're going to lean to social choice. So how can we recast this as a social choice problem? So we have a set of participants B, people telling us their pairwise comparisons of things. We're going to assume that people have preferences over the set that's just determined again by some linear reward function. Right, so like the reason I'm ranking C above C prime is because I have an underlying reward function that actually is giving high reward to C over C prime. And again, for the same reason that we think linear rewards are reasonable output, maybe it's a reasonable input. People's preferences are not like super complicated. The feature space is rich. Another benefit is a lot of our results are negative. So like extra assumptions is actually, it doesn't work even if you do this. So and we can discuss offline if this is reasonable. And now, like in choosing this reward function, standard axioms for social choice just make sense, right? Pareto optimality, like super basic one that you might want. What if everybody in the data set told us they prefer A over B? And everybody told us this pair. We should probably choose a theta that gives A a higher reward than B. Seems like a very basic social choice problem. Lots of other things do as well. I'm only going to focus on PO today, but paper talks about other things. So given this, we can now look at how do things perform with respect to these axioms. How do we do according to PO? So the first result is what we're doing right now is not going to be good. So pretty much so certainly Bradley-Terry Luise, but like a huge class of loss functions. If you're just going to do an ML thing and run a loss function, try to match the data set, even if you get access to just complete rankings, like basically people's whole reward functions, there's going to be instances where you fail PO. And so pretty bad news for the way we're currently doing things. Another thing that's strange is that another kind of reasonable input to try to get social choice, good social choice properties is to just only look at majority relationships. Especially a lot of social choice properties only care about majority relationships. Rules that satisfy this are called C1, by the way. And again, we're in a situation where if the only thing you look at is majority relationships, you can't get PO. There are situations where you just can't distinguish things. And I just want to highlight this, like very different from basic or like standard social choice. We didn't have this linear restriction. And there, if you just ran Bradley-Terry without this like extra linear thing, it just would be PO. It always is. It's pretty easy to prove. And the same thing here. Like if you want to be PO and only use majority relationships, you can run Copeland. That's a fine rule, or rank by a Copeland score. So these things seem like very specific to this linear model that we lose some like really basic properties. And I'd say like PO truly is one of the most basic social choice properties that we want to satisfy. We do match this with some positive results. We come up with a novel rule using this information that is able to satisfy PO and several other axioms. It also has the benefit it doesn't need these complete rankings. It just needs like good estimates of pairwise comparisons between every pair. I definitely think of this more as like a theoretical thing. I'm not saying we should run RLHF with our new social choice rule, but I think it really shows that like these properties are reasonable. Like it wasn't a very complicated rule. Proofs aren't quite simple, but like there are ways to achieve these things and other good axioms. So we could hopefully expect that getting good axiomatic properties and good RLHF performance are compatible.
So,
Yeah.
So what do you mean by reasonable then in the first?
Convex, basically.
Okay.
Yes, convex plus like some tiny things. You can either be strictly convex or weakly convex things, but pretty much everything that's. I think you could even generalize beyond that. So intuitively, I would say like anything you can. And you know, from a theoretical perspective, what's the challenge here? Like, we're really just trying to develop social choice functions that take in rankings that are linearly reducible, output rankings that are linearly reducible. So it's just like a restriction of the domain. But it's kind of a weird restriction domain, and pretty much like any rule you want to run just will not fit with this domain. If you like input some of these rankings, you'll get rankings out that are not in the domain, so you can't output them. So you know, what you would want to do just won't work. You can't just implement things directly, or like standard restrictions just don't seem to apply very easily. Okay, just to wrap up, this is worked up on new directions. So here's a ton of new directions. I think this is really exciting area. Okay, so linear social choice is from a theory perspective. We've defined it here. We've proved some nice axiomatic properties, but really like quite a few open questions still, especially things like monotonicity and parade optimality together. They seem like pretty challenging. We spent some time with them, but I think it's like pretty basic questions that are still open. I think this is pretty cool. Or impossibilities. We have this one thing for like majority relationships, but it'd also be very cool just to find instances where you can't get certain combinations. And of course, working simultaneously with RLHF. You don't want just axiomatic properties like practical people better like this. But more broadly, I think like AI alignment and social choice really have very nice connections. And there's a lot of work to be done here, just to show like this is very active. Like just tons and tons of papers from this year. They're still in archive. Like they haven't even been published yet. They're also primarily being done by RL people. I find like they. Some of them could, I think, use a social choice person on the paper just to guide them, or in certain literatures. But there's this really broad question of how should we align large language models to people's preferences when there's some diversity. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you.